Blog post 130. Date, November 23rd. Followers, 77,423. Sorry, I took a quick break there. It's late, and most of the houses seem to have some sort of party going on before the occupants head out for the night. Apparently a pre-weekend thing. The noise was making it way too distracting to write, but it's quietened down now, so I'm back. And ready to finish telling you what happened when I went to see Finn. Kalina's smile as she walked away from his house wasn't like the ones she usually offers people, where it's impossible to decide if she's being genuine or she's getting ready to sink her fangs into you and steal your handbag. This looked totally authentic. As desperate as I'd been to talk to Finn and state my case about what he'd seen, now that we were face to face, I knew it was going to be a lot harder than I'd anticipated. Everything I'd practiced saying in my head just evaporated. "Are you coming in?" he asked, gesturing towards the door before turning and heading inside. I hesitated before panicking he might close it in my face if I didn't hurry up, so I broke free of my paralysis and headed over. Seeing a person's home suddenly transition from that of a teenager to an adult is a strange experience. Even when we'd been young, Finn had always been fairly tidy and minimalist in his decor. He'd never been one to fill his bedroom with massive posters of bands or scantily clad women. Instead, one of his walls had been devoted to a bookshelf and desk, which was again loaded with books, and then in the corner sat all his guitars. Amazingly, this grown-up Finn with an entire flat to fill had changed very little. The place smelt clean, beneath the pong of one of those air fresheners you stick into a plug socket that puffs out overly strong perfume every 2 minutes. There were no cooking smells, apart from the tang of old takeaway, probably sitting at the bottom of his kitchen bin. Judging from what I saw, I think it's fair to say he doesn't spend a lot of time there, which is a shame, because it was beautiful. Sleek white countertops, chrome fittings, simple but tasteful. The living area was open plan, and following his lead I took a seat on one of the 2 large grey sofas. Off to one side was an older navy armchair. It was the only piece of furniture that had looked like it had had any real use. Unsurprisingly, that was where he was sitting. I could easily imagine him there at another time, book in hand, glass of whiskey on the side table to sit between chapters. I waited, assuming that, as he was the one who'd invited me in, he was going to be the one to start the conversation. However, nearly a minute ticked by, and it was silent. I've never been good in tense situations, but I'm even worse now I'm a vampire. Every little noise makes my muscles start twitching. Even someone just breathing or swallowing sounds impossibly loud. "So, Kalina," I said, unable to stand it any longer. "You two seemed friendly. Are we what?" He raised his eyebrows, waiting to hear how I was going to finish my comment, but I wasn't sure. Was I asking if they were back together? No, they couldn't be. That was just ridiculous. But then what would it matter if they were? I'm with Noah. Noah, who is completely sedated. Noah, who doesn't have a pulse. Noah, who I haven't spoken to for weeks and whose last words to me I disregarded. I'm with him, not Finn. It shouldn't matter to me if Finn and Kalina do get back together. After all, they were married. I realise I'm talking way too much about this. It makes it seem like I'm hung up on them, which I'm definitely not. And if there were any hint of jealousy, that's just residual from our past. Besides, there's nothing to be hung up on. There's really not. After an internal monologue, fairly similar to the one I've just vomited onto this page, I picked my word. "Friends," I said. Are you and Kalina friends now? Finn pressed his lips together. No, I wouldn't say that. But we did have an interesting conversation. You did? Yes. She wanted to explain to me what happened last night. At this point, I could barely breathe. What the hell could she have said to him? Did she say that I'd left Noah on his own? That I'd said I was only going for one quick drink, then ended up at a second bar? I wouldn't have put anything past her. With my foot tapping on the floor like I was drumming at 180, I waited for him to continue. She said that she was the one who persuaded you to try feeding the way you were. That she'd basically forced you into it after you'd refused and said you didn't want to. She did? She did. She said how upset you were, how much you hated the idea of it, but she also told me about how important it is for you to, feed naturally, to stay healthy. Naturally? You're healthy, I repeated, trying to hide the surprise in my voice. Yes, that was it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have freaked out like that. It's just not something you expect to come across, Your ex feeding from a guy in the street. Or your brother's girlfriend, I added. I don't know why I felt the need to say that bit. It shouldn't have made any difference, but there was something about the way he'd said ex that just jarred with me. Like that was still the defining part of our relationship. And it wasn't just in my head. For the first time since stepping into his flat, Finn's pulse notched upwards. A slight tick, and it came with a surge of emotions. Why were you there anyway? I asked. It was hardly the most savoury of places to be, in a back alley. Finn got up and crossed the cabinet, which he opened to reveal a surprisingly extensive collection of whiskies. I know the owner of the bar. Some of these cost a fortune, but he gets them for me wholesale. I have to go round the back, though. Oh, right. I can't explain why seeing that much alcohol made me feel uneasy. Finn's an adult. Of course he drinks. But something about his posture told me he'd wanted to keep it hidden. That's what seemed strange, I guess. In the moments that followed, time moved impossibly slowly, as I noted the beat of the second hand of his watch. I thought perhaps that was it. He'd said his piece, I'd said mine, I was about to get up and leave. But just as I opened my mouth to say I should be off, Finn spoke again. You know you can feed from me, he said, locking his eyes on mine. If that's what you need, you can use me. It's not that simple, I replied. Why not? A pause followed, and I honestly don't know what I wanted to say. I could have told him that it was risky, but it wasn't. I knew I wouldn't go too far. At least, not when it came to feeding. Seeing you there, seeing you touch him like that. Finn stopped to swallow. I can't believe how it made me feel. Could it have been something like I felt thinking you and Kalina were back together? I said, with a little chuckle, trying to ease the awkwardness that seemed to have hijacked our conversation. Maybe, he agreed. Once again, we fell into silence, heavy with the weight of everything we wanted to say. Now, before you guys jump down my throat and tell me what a bitch I'm being to Noah in all this, I need you to know that nothing happened between me and Finn, and nothing is going to. But that doesn't mean there are no feelings at all there. I know I told you it was all in the past, and I know I said that we were nothing more than friends, but I hadn't realised what was lying dormant under the surface until I saw him with Kalina. "I'm sorry," I said, finally offering the only words I could find. "You don't have to say that." "That's not true. There's so much I have to apologise for. I'm sorry about what you saw, about me being what I am, about Noah, about being with Noah," he said, with a hitch in his voice and his pulse. "I mean about what I did to him, about turning him." "Oh, of course," Finn said, shaking his head and letting a small sigh escape his lips. "Of course. Not about being with him." "I loved Noah," I said. I didn't mean to use the past tense. I didn't even notice that I had until Finn drew my attention to it. His back stiffened. "You think you've lost him? Because you changed him when he asked you not to." Now this came as a total shock, and it was a good job that I was sitting down because my body felt like a lead balloon. You know that? How?" I stammered. "I just know he wouldn't have chosen this." "And you're still here?" "Where else have I got to go?" I had no answer, and as the silence stretched out between us, Finn came and sat down beside me on the sofa. "Rin," he said, "I am sure it will all be fine." I could hear him speaking, yet it seemed to be coming through a dense fog which was distorting everything he said, rendering it unintelligible. "I should walk you home." He stood up and offered me his hand, which I didn't take, although I did stand. Noah's going to be different. The man I'd fallen in love with, the one I'd given my heart to, might not even exist now. That was what was going through my head as I stumbled forward, but Finn caught me, and the touch of his skin sent tingles surging through me. When I looked up, our faces, our lips, were only inches apart. "I've got you, Rin. I'll always have you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Summoning my last modicum of restraint, I pulled myself away. "It's fine, I'm fine. I just need some space, that's all. I need... I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know what I needed. All I knew was that I couldn't be there with him. And so I spent the next hour walking the streets, trying to make sense of what I'd just realised. But without Noah the way I knew and loved him, there's no sense in anything anymore. Blog post 131. Date November 24th. Followers 77,537. These past few weeks, I've been hanging on to the fact that it's just a matter of time until Mum agrees to stop Noah's sedatives so he can wake up. A matter of time before he learns to feed and control his bloodlust and get used to all the new senses around him. A matter of time before we're together again. But what if that isn't what he wants? What if all he wants is to be as far away from me as possible? Things with Finn aren't exactly helping either. When I stumbled out of his flat yesterday evening, my mind was whirring, and I thought I might have some time to get my thoughts together. I thought that after a night by myself, I might manage to get my head straight and would see things a little more clearly. Unfortunately, as you've probably already figured out, my life doesn't work like that. Instead, I'd been home for less than an hour when I heard a knock on the front door. And I knew exactly who it was. "What are you doing here?" I said, slipping outside. The air was bracing and Finn's breath was fogging in front of him. With his hands dug deep into his pockets, he was wrapped up in a coat and scarf. Maybe I should have invited him in, but Glenn was in the kitchen, and I already knew that whatever this conversation entailed, it wasn't going to be something I wanted my little brother hearing. "I came to check on you. I didn't like how we left things." "I'm fine," I said bluntly. "And you've checked on me now, so you can head back home." I turned around, making my position clear, but he caught my hand. An electric pulse shot through us. And by electric, I don't mean a little tingle. I'm talking about a full-blown 200-volt shock that went all the way to my bones. And I know it wasn't just me who felt it, from the way Finn gasped and his pulse rocketed. "Rin," he said, pulling me back around to face him. "I know there's no right time to talk about us." "There is no us," I cut across him before he could say something I didn't want to hear. "There is Noah and me, and you are Noah's brother, and you are my friend. That is it. We're friends." It's not enough. I know I promised I would back off. I would let you and him be a thing, but he's not here, Rin. And I see how much you're hurting, and I want to help you. You know I would do anything for you." I saw the way his hand was reaching down, ready to take mine, ready to pull me close, to hold me, to do anything I needed him to. For a split second, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to rest my head against his chest and listen to his heartbeat. To feel his lips touch the top of my head or my lips. But before I could be drawn into anything, I pushed myself away from him. "You should go now," I said. "I need to check on Noah." I stepped back into the house and closed the door behind me. And now my head is a mess. I can't remember feeling so screwed up about anything in a long time. But despite that, there's finally some clarity. Finn's visit confirmed it for me. I need to wake Noah up. Now. Blog post 132. Date, November 25th. Followers 77,866. Morning all. Well, my head is utterly messed up. I was going to have a break and not write today, but then I remembered that typing stuff for you guys really helps to set things straight in my mind. Hence, I'm here again, hoping to make sense of the conversation I had this morning. It was before 6 when I set out for the park, trying yet again to get my head around the situation between Finn and me. I wasn't worried about Noah. Glenn was already up, swatting for some tests, so he wasn't going anywhere, and Mum was due to drop in too. So I took my time watching the dog walkers and the early morning joggers. If it had been a bit cloudier, I could have stayed there all day, but eventually, after a couple of hours, I felt that telltale prickle on my skin and decided it was probably time to head back home. I was a little more than surprised when I reached my house and saw Kalina standing out the front. I was even more surprised by what she was wearing. Flat pumps, ordinary jeans, and not a designer handbag or yappy dog in sight. "What's going on?" I called, racing towards her. "Where's Noah? Where's Glenn? What's happened?" You might think that maybe I was overreacting at seeing her a little bit, but Kalina has never, to my knowledge at least, hung around outside our front door. Had a key cut? Yes. Picked the lock when we also took her key off her? Also yes. But just waited outside? Never. And the only reason I could fathom for her doing that was if there was no one to let her in. hence my immediate panic. "They're inside," she said. "Your mum was here too. She left about an hour ago. We didn't chat much, though." "You've been waiting for an hour?" I said, even more confused. "I have. I wanted to check how things went with Finn. Are you two okay now?" "Yep. I definitely wasn't expecting that. I bet you guys are as shocked as I am." "You told him that I needed to drink like that? That it's better for my health?" I questioned, aware that I wasn't actually answering her. She nodded, a slight trace of her characteristic smile playing on her lips. "I figured a small white lie might help ease the friction between you two. Besides, I think it's technically true. I'm sure I could find some data on it if you like, assuming that Angela doesn't already have it." She tried again with the smile, but I couldn't reciprocate it. I was way too skeptical. "Why did you tell him that? And why did you tell him that you forced me to feed from that guy? That I wasn't responsible?" Given how long she'd waited to speak to me, I expected her to be a little bit more forthcoming with her answers. But all she did was shrug and look at the ground evasively. "I guess I've been responsible for breaking up so many relationships over the years. I figured I might be able to repair one for a change. Or at least try to. This might surprise you, but I do acknowledge that I might have made one or two mistakes in the past." This time I couldn't help but laugh, although it came out closer to a scoff than a chuckle. "I also want you to know that I've stopped reading your blog," she blurted out before I had a chance to say more. "Sorry?" "Your blog. I used to read it. Remember?" I did, now she'd mentioned it, but it was one of those things I'd let slip from my mind. It was how she'd been able to tell Finn all those details about me and Noah, how we were in a relationship, and it was also how she knew Glenn was vulnerable and befriended him. But that was weeks ago, and somehow the thought that she would still be reading it, when she saw me most days anyway, seemed quite ridiculous. But there you go. I should have known better. "I was reading it more out of habit than anything else," she continued, "and it's good. You're funny. I really like it." She paused as if chewing an invisible piece of gum. "It felt like I was chatting with a friend, you know? And I don't get much of that. It can be pretty lonely being me." Now, reading when a human is lying is straightforward for me. All the lips and eye twitches. You've read it here before. You know what I can do. But reading Kalina is so much harder. She doesn't have any of those tells. Yet there seemed to be something radiating from her for the first time. Sincerity? Does that sound ridiculous? I'm sure it does, but that's how it felt. "I get it," I said. "That's what the blog feels like for me too." She looked at her feet again and nodded, and I wondered what she'd been like before she was changed. Not this calculating, hard-ass bitch I've got used to. Of that, I'm sure. "It's hard to get to know someone well when you're like us," she said. "You have to keep moving. You have to get out of people's lives before they grow suspicious of the fact that you're not aging. Or else come clean and hope they stand by you. And trust me, that hardly ever happens. What you've got here, well, I guess I'm jealous. That's what I'm trying to say." She paused, and I wondered if she was expecting me to say something, but I couldn't think of what. Anyway, she wasn't done yet. I know this is probably hard to believe, Merowyn, but I would genuinely like it if we could be friends. Really. And I won't read your blog anymore. I'll wait for you to tell me in person if there's something you want me to know. To my surprise, I then replied, thank you. The thing is, no one gets loneliness better than I do. It was like that for 7 years. And for all I know, Kalina's had 50 times that long or more. I can't imagine what that would do to a person. But then she added one last kicker to the conversation. One I could never have predicted. Also, she said, if you want to stop donating venom, yours and Noah's, then I understand. Stop donating. It won't exactly be great for business, but I realise that friendships don't normally come with coercion factored into them. So, if you want to stop, that's fine. Or I wondered where this could go next. Or I could cut you in on it. I thought that maybe you could do with the cash, and it's a nice little earner. I'll admit that the idea of extra money certainly caught my attention. If not for me, then for Glenn. I don't need much, but if there was a bit more, he could get away in the summer. Maybe take this new guy of his somewhere hot and exceptionally sunny where he doesn't have to worry about vampires. That was my initial thought, until I remembered what V had done to Noah and the way he'd said my name before dropping to the ground. I know his reaction was rare. Mum's test confirmed it, but still. Vampire? Yes. Vampire drug dealer? Not yet. I'll think about it, I said. But since we're being truthful, there's something I need from you. Okay? I want to wake Noah. He's been out of it for too long. I need him back. Will you help me? And will you help me teach him how to be a vampire? And make sure he doesn't hurt anyone? As if my morning couldn't get any weirder, Kalina stepped forward and took my hands in hers. It would be my pleasure, she said. Blog post 133. Date November 25th. Followers 78,111. Thank you to everyone who told me to keep my guard up where Kalina's concerned. You can stop sending me messages now telling me how she's going to stab me in the back. After everything I've told you about her, I understand. I don't completely trust her either. But I am understanding more and more why she acts the way she does. She looks out for number one. That's what she's had to do her entire vampire life, which is probably far longer than you or I could even fathom. Being that old and seeing all the things she must have seen is bound to have had an impact on her and shaped her thinking. I don't know about you, but being a young woman isn't easy. Being one since the 18th century, or even earlier, I can only imagine the number of times she's had to use her fangs to protect herself. So what I'm saying is, I'm going to offer her a clean slate. I'm going to take her at face value for how she actually behaves from this moment onwards. Forget the past. We've all done things we regret. I know I have. And I'd hate to be continuously judged for those. I don't expect it to be easy, but I want to try for my sake as much as hers. Holding on to all that bad history can't be healthy, even if I am already dead. Now, back to what you probably want to hear about. Noah. Once Kalina had left, I went upstairs to phone Mum. As it happened, she was on call and didn't ring back for hours. In fact, it was mid-afternoon when I finally heard from her. "Rin, honey," she said. "Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure. I don't think it's urgent, but are you free to come over? It's to do with Noah." I was vague enough that she'd be concerned, but calm enough that I knew she wouldn't panic. "I've still got another 2 hours until my shift ends. I can get to you by 8, if that's not too late." "I'm a vampire, Mum," I said, with just a hint of the curtness that's become normal in our conversations. "Okay, I'll see you then." So that was it. All I had to do was wait for her to arrive, at which point I would inform her I wanted us to wake Noah up, ASAP. As I tend to in the evenings, I sat upstairs with him. He needed feeding. His fangs were out, his lips twitching like they do when it's been a while since we last fed him. But I didn't give him anything. I hate doing it, almost as much as I hate tranquilizing him, and given that Mum was already coming over, and all this mess is essentially down to her, I figured she could feed him. When she let herself into the house, it was, as she'd predicted, just gone 8. "Merwin!" Up here I called. Entering the bedroom, her attention went straight to Noah. "He needs feeding," she said. "You're perfectly capable of doing that yourself. As long as you don't give him too much, you know he won't wake up." I didn't answer as she unlocked the fridge and took out a plastic blood bag, which she opened and held to his mouth. He instantly began drawing on it, guzzling mouthful after mouthful of the blood. When it was half empty, she looked at me. "A tranquilizer, please, Merwin." I hate having to be complicit in Noah's sedation. Part of me thinks that he's listening in, taking note of every time I fetch Mum or Glenn a needle, that he's keeping tally of everything I do to keep him in this state. "Rin, did you hear me? I need the tranquilizer." It was so tempting to chicken out, to continue along the path of least resistance. However, I steeled myself for my mother's protests and took a step back from the bed. "I want to wake him up," I said. "I'm done with this waiting. If he's changed, I want to know about it now." So I was probably being a little impulsive, demanding that we woke Noah up that instant because I knew full well it wasn't my decision alone. "The family needs to agree before we do that. This affects all of us," my mum said, exactly as I could have predicted. And she was right. Finn is Noah's brother, and Glenn is likely to become the first human to live in a house with 2 vampires. That would freak me out, and I am one, so I can't imagine how he'd feel about it. "I agree," I replied, "but Kalina needs to be here too." "Kalina?" Mum's eyes rose in surprise. "I thought you wanted her as far away as possible. She's the one to blame for all of this." "None of us are blameless, Mother. No one except Finn. We've all played our part, and there's no point pretending we haven't." I knew I'd pissed her off by the drawn-out sniff she gave, but she stayed quiet and waited for me to explain. "We need Kalina involved, to help teach Noah how to hunt discreetly and safely, like she's done with me. And we might need her strength too. We have no idea what Noah will be capable of when he wakes up." She didn't look convinced, and had this been a year ago, I have no doubt that she would have dismissed my idea and bulldozed over my wishes to get her own way. But I'm not the same person I was back then, and it's not so easy to dismiss me. "I'll send a message now," I said, "and call a meeting for tomorrow morning, and Kalina will be here." She gets a vote too. At that, I turned on my heel, ready to head downstairs and tell you lot what happened. As you guys have no doubt already figured, it's a calculated decision on my part, wanting to have Kalina there when we decide. Given what I mentioned before, I think it's fair to say that Glenn probably doesn't want me to wake Noah up right now, particularly when he's just getting his life back in order and dating again. And Mum has made it perfectly clear where she stands. With Glenn and Mum on the other side, if what Kalina said about wanting to be friends is true, then she's going to take mine. And even if it's not, I suspect she won't miss a chance to shake things up a little with more drama. And bringing Noah back into the mix would definitely achieve that. So that leaves Finn. And I guess I've just got to hope that he can see the sense in bringing him back. That's it. The messages have all been sent. It's all been arranged. Now all I can do is wait. You've been listening to Bloodsucker's blog, Book 3, Lost Souls. Written by Ella Stone, narrated by Hannah Lynn, and produced by Papercat Publishing. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.